I was always known as Jerry Smith's little sister. I'm not sure people knew who I was. Those are just special times. You know, you remember the stadium, people bouncing, you could just feel your seat just moving. That's my brother, and he was talented. I love him.
I always knew I was gay, and talking to Jerry Smith, he always knew he was gay. The fear was instilled from a very early age. Everything you want is going to be destroyed if they find out. People would be kicked out of their homes. People would lose their families. They definitely would lose their jobs. So if anyone looking back say, well, he could have, no, he couldn't have.
Jerry was a good-looking guy. He was, the tight end for the Washington Redskins. He must have every girl in Washington. And somebody said, well, he's gay. And, that was shocking. One of the things I learned is that a person's sexual preference has nothing to do with their heart. If anything, I think that the life of Jerry Smith showed that a guy can be a productive person, can be a loyal person, can be a moral person, and it has nothing to do with their sexual preference.
Doesn't seem that long ago, and it's been a while, but it's very fresh. And I guess some things you just don't forget.
You're going to be a football player when you grow up.
Today is the best day of your life. Believe it.
He might be the finest quarterback produced in the last 10 years.
He needs a day like that. That's all I need.
Fortunately for me, I didn't lose my life, didn't lose my job. Football convinced me that life is a team game.
Rest of your life. Nobody could ever tell you that you couldn't do it.
I had just never realized the talent that he had. And to see him in the paper and with the Redskins, that was just unbelievable. He was just a Redskin through and through.
Jurgensen is blessed with the receiving corps unmatched in pro football. Tight end Jerry Smith has sure hands and extraordinary moves and balance. The strategic pass in important situations is thrown to Smith.
Did you get out? TC mentioned something to me about it.
He became a go-to guy for me. He was outstanding. When you needed a play to be made, you knew that you could throw the ball to him in some way or somehow he was going to catch the thing.
From 1965 to 1977, Jerry Smith was a tight end for the Washington Redskins. He was one of the best in his era, making 2 Pro Bowls. He played in a Super Bowl, and when he retired, Smith had more touchdown receptions than any other tight end in NFL history.
This guy was a tremendous football player. Tough as nails, great hands, just so dependable.
He would not wait for the ball to arrive. Jerry responded as if the football was his. It belonged to him.
Smith earned praise for his play on the field, but he was also respected for how he handled himself in public.
They were getting off the bus. We were at Redskin Park. Jerry came over to me, and I said, "Hey, Jerry, how you doing?" He said, "Sandy, I need to apologize to you." And I said, "What for?" He said, "I made Billy look bad today." He said, "I didn't do my job right." He said, "I made him look bad." He said, "I dropped the ball or something like that." I said, "Jerry, if everybody had that attitude, we'd never lose another game." But that was Jerry. He was a nice man. He was a gentleman. He was kind. He was gorgeous.
Hi, I'm Jerry Smith of the Washington Redskins, and Zeke, pass catching is the most important part of football.
Hey, wait a second.
He was uniquely handsome, and he had a great laugh and a great smile.
All the ladies liked him. All the ladies were after him. You know, he was a single guy.
Every woman I know took a shot at him, and he was nice, he was great, but he never dated anybody. When we go to team parties, you know, all the wives would cluster around him, and, you know, they just loved to talk to him, and he'd talk to all the wives and girlfriends, and I know he could have taken a few of them home if he wanted to, and he didn't give them a tumble.
I didn't realize that he was gay, and, you know, and there was nothing to suggest that he was, you know, gay in my mind.
He never talked to anybody in the team about it. He didn't want the people to think, hey, Jerry's terrible, look what he's doing. And he kept it kind of on low end, a secret.
If people knew, they probably didn't talk about it. Playing professional sports, there are a lot of things that you can't control. There is that fear, because you don't want someone to take away something that you love doing, and you love it so much.
He knew all of that he was living in real fear and real scared and really alone and terrified that he was going to lose everything.
Up next,
if Jerry had come out, he would have not been a Redskin. Worst kept secret in the gay community and the best kept secret in the straight community.
Some people are born with physical gifts that make them perfectly suited for life in the National Football League. Jerry Smith was not one of them.
He was real thin, and he looked like he couldn't even play soccer. We had no idea the talent that was in his body.
I think he was a junior in high school, and his coach pretty much said to him, hey, Smith, I don't know what you're doing, why you're trying, you're never gonna make it anywhere. And he said at that point in time, he was gonna prove to that coach and to everybody that he could do it. And he didn't take the easy way. I mean, he went to a small little junior college, and then he got picked up by Arizona State.
He had speed, he had great hands, so Frank, being Frank, Cush that is, said, hey, he's tight end, so to me, he's the first H-back.
Smith had found his calling on the football field. He also found others who shared his sexual orientation.
A mutual friend told me he was gay before I met him, and I certainly wanted to meet him. I was very active in politics, which was a big no-no for being gay, and he was active in football, and that was an equally big no-no. It was clearly a bond. The two of us thought we were the only, literally, maybe 5 or 6 gays in all of the state of Arizona. You got to remember, there were no newspapers, there was no centers, there were no organizations. There was just people with shattered lives if they were discovered. Let's be real clear. If anyone knew that he was gay, he would have been off that team. There's no if, ands, or buts, and maybe out of the school.
Smith was living a double life that would continue for 3 decades. On one hand, a closeted gay man in an intolerant era, and on the other, a 9th-round draft pick for the 1965 Washington Redskins.
He was a little undersized as a tight end, but he was fearless. He weighed 215, 220 or whatever, but, you know, he was fearless in terms of trying to block defensive ends.
He's had the Mike Ditka thing in a 210-pound body. You know, Mike is 240, Jerry's 220, but he could do the same thing. Yeah.
Jerry was 218 today.
Yeah.
Jerry did? Yeah.
Jerry has a hard time holding.
Is that right? He gets down about 2.5, huh?
He'll be 210, 210.
When we had weigh-in, Jerry would have these 3-pound weights or 5-pound weights he put underneath his arms to get on the scale. He thought he had to run the perfect pattern every time because, you know, he was not very big as a tight end.
By his third season, he was small in stature, but not statistics. In 1967, Smith's 67 catches were the second most in the NFL. And his 12 touchdown receptions remain a Redskins single-season record to this day.
I mean, he worked hard getting down the patterns that we required him to run. He would go down and catch a ball because he wouldn't reach down and catch it. He'd go down a slide and catch a ball. He was a special player for us.
Mid and late 60s, Juergens is throwing passes to Bobby Mitchell, Jerry Smith, and Charlie Taylor, and started a sellout run in the mid-60s that lasts today. The town, was set on its ear.
One thing we both agree about, playing winning football is fun.
Buying your next car from Bob Rosenthal will even be more fun.
And you'll save money, too.
In public, the local hero mingled with the likes of the Kennedys, but his sexuality was a private matter, even with his best friend and roommate, Brig Owens.
I felt that if Jerry had wanted to discuss it, he would have discussed it. And like I said, there were situations where, there are people that would jump around and so forth. And, but we never discussed it other than, he knew I was aware.
In 1969, the biggest topic of conversation in D.C. sports was the arrival of a hard-nosed legend as the Redskins' new head coach.
In spite of what some of you may think, I can't walk across the Potomac even when it's frozen.
He wouldn't stop talking about Vince. Vince was a great coach, great person, loved Jerry, and Jerry loved him.
In Vince Lombardi, Smith found a coach who was not only tough, but tolerant. Lombardi's own brother Harold was gay, and Vince made it clear that discrimination would not be welcomed in his locker room.
Their first-round draft choice, Ray McDonald, a big fullback out of Idaho, happened to be gay. And, it wasn't known publicly, but within the locker room it was well known. And several of the assistant coaches one day were making fun of Ray. And Lombardi came across this and said, if I hear any of you talking like that again, you're gone.
In 1969, the Redskins recorded the franchise's first winning season in 14 years. And the undersized kid with the big secret had become the best tight end in football. But there was no outrunning the truth of the times. Though gay men may have been quietly accepted on Lombardi's Redskins, their secret was never publicly discussed. It was a don't ask, don't tell environment for Pro Bowlers like Smith or journeymen like Dave Kopay.
A teammate learned that Lombardi had picked me up off waivers and said, you're going to love the Redskins and you're going to love all the people, and especially you're going to love Jerry Smith. And he says, he's your kind of guy. And I thought, wow, that was interesting. One night when we did get together, we were out drinking, and one thing led to another. All of a sudden, there was Jerry in bed with me, loving me, and maybe I was still buzzed or whatever, but I thought this was really good. At least I was sharing something of myself with someone who was close and understood all that I had been through and understood so much of what we hoped for would come, And that's where we left it. And it never happened again.
Still to come.
The phone rang at the office, and it was Dave Kopay.
We thought that friendship had been violated and an unwritten code of conduct had been violated.
He truly was all about the team. That's not a cliche. He lived it.
Pursuit of a championship drove Jerry Smith to become one of the best tight ends in football. and helped turn Washington's passing game into the league's finest.
Our main problem was stopping people. You know, we'd play Dallas and we'd either win 31-30 or lose 31-30.
From 1966 to 1970, Jerry Smith caught more passes for more yards than any tight end in football. But the team's goal of a playoff berth remained elusive.
We weren't a complete football team, you know, offensively and defensively.
5 months after Vince Lombardi's death in 1970, the Redskins hired defensive wizard George Allen as head coach.
He wanted to win 14-7, and we wanted to win 34-7.
As you guys know, I look for a low-scoring game. They got a hell of a defense, you see.
Allen's philosophy was don't lose the game, let the defense win it for you.
So much different than last year. I noticed the difference like yesterday. I spent as much time watching the defense. I noticed the guys on the sidelines too, and they were really excited. And
That's right.
Everybody was pulling.
Right. Yeah.
It's been that way in a long way.
In Allen's system, Smith's main responsibility was blocking.
He never complained, never was upset, just did his job.
Despite Smith's diminished numbers, he helped Washington reach the postseason for the first time in nearly 30 years.
Three cheers for the Redskins. Hip, hip. Hip, hip. Hip, hip.
While everyone was watching the Redskins, few paid attention to Smith's personal life.
I think we had a suspicion, but it was not like we were out there trying to out him. And it was a little bit of a different era. You know, back then there were 2 newspapers who covered him. Occasionally a TV station would show up. There was no real sports talk radio. There was no webs. There were no internet. And if we had what we have today in terms of social media, something would have slipped out, something would have happened.
Did the guys in the locker room know? I think they knew for sure. If you ask them personally, most of them will say, well, we didn't really know. We suspected.
I think a lot of us suspected it. We really didn't know.
I mean, I didn't know for sure. I didn't ask him. He didn't tell me that.
Well, I really didn't know till after he retired. I mean, really knew.
Did not know. And did not affect us in any way when we found out.
I never heard anything.
I believe they were players who wouldn't have cared, and I believe there are players who would have demanded that he be kicked off the team. I believe there are players who would have participated in the oppression of him if they knew. And I believe that he knew all of that. It's real important not to look back on this with 2013 eyes. This was a horrendous existence.
If there actually were a homosexual in the league, which I have no evidence that there is, if you have a homosexual, he's always subject to possible compromise. That's been a standard situation in world activities and espionage. There's been a history in espionage activities and international affairs of homosexuals being compromised and used against their better interests. So that would naturally be a matter of concern to us.
He faced fear, and I can tell you this because we talked about it, every day of his life that he played. From day one, Jerry wanted to play ball. I mean, this man loved football. He was living his dream. And if anyone had known he'd be gay, they would snatch that dream from him forever.
Smith's fears didn't seem to affect his play. In 1972, Washington advanced to its first Super Bowl. Against Miami, the Redskins faced the NFL's top-rated defense.
Their offense was shut down, and Jerry, for the most part, was shut down.
Trailing in the fourth quarter, Washington mounted its best drive of the day.
That's the darndest thing. I had Jerry wide open in the end zone.
Dummer into the end zone.
And I hit the goalpost.
Jerry Smith, the tight end, looked like he was open, cutting behind the goalpost deep in the end zone. Billy Kilmer said, what more can happen?
The goalpost was on the goal line in those days, and I told him, I said, you couldn't do that if you were trying to.
The next year, they moved the goalpost back to the end line.
The Redskins were intercepted on the next play. As their season ended in defeat, Smith and his teammates were left wondering, what if?
What do you think it would have meant to Jerry's legacy if he would have caught a touchdown in the Super Bowl?
I don't know. You know, it's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought about that, but he could have been possibly going into the Hall of Fame.
Still to come.
It was a stunningly courageous thing for him to do, to sit there and tell me his story.
That article was the beginning. It isn't the kind of thing back then, and even for some people today, that the more success you get or the more money you make or the more fame you obtain, that it becomes easier. In many ways, it becomes more difficult because the stakes are high. You not only are letting down your family suddenly or your close friends, you're letting down a fan base. You're letting down your team.
By 1974, no active American athlete had publicly revealed his or her homosexuality. Jerry Smith had no intention of being the first.
Jerry was, very respected. Obviously on the field, he'd proven himself over the years, but also, the way he carried himself, he was, he was a great teammate.
Smith's team-first approach was tested when George Allen signed tight end Gene Fugit, a player with superior size and speed, to a multi-year contract.
If it bothered him, you didn't see it. He just accepted it as, hey, Gene is going to play a lot, and I'm going to play a lot, and let's go.
It was assumed, because of the contract that I signed, that I would, eventually be the starter. I really didn't expect him to be so helpful and supportive as a teammate.
He helped Gene out and showed him some things. And Jerry's that type of guy. He didn't sulk or do anything. He was a team guy, and he whatever he did to help the team.
Being around him and watching how he carried himself and watching how he interacted with the team and how he contributed to the team, probably as much as anything, made me realize that, hey, that's his business.
We had a reputation across the league. The Redskins had more gay guys than anybody. We had like 12 at one time, I think. We just played football. We didn't care if you could play. We didn't worry about that.
In 1975, a young reporter from the Washington Star began investigating homosexuality in sports.
The other sports writers at the Star were really plugged in all over the league with different players. A couple suggested I go talk to Jerry.
Smith met Lynn Rossellini at Washington's Key Bridge Marriott under the assumption that it would be a standard player profile.
I got there first. I was so nervous. He came over, sat down, hello. And then I said I want to talk to you in connection with this series I'm writing on gay athletes. And I held my breath. So he sat there, moment of silence, very serious. And he said, okay, but here are the ground rules. You can't use my name. You can't say what team I play for. And you can't use my position.
For the first time, albeit anonymously, Smith was able to tell his story publicly, painting the portrait of a thriving player, walking the tightrope of a double life.
I think finally that he just wanted to get a lot of it off his chest. He just wanted to kind of take a breath.
Though he knew he couldn't jeopardize everything, he had to do something.
He said, there's nobody I can talk to about this. He didn't confide in his teammates. I mean, who can you trust?
And just by that mere act, even though it was anonymously, Jerry, for a brief moment, breathed some freedom. stood up, had some dignity, had some integrity.
The only physical trait described was that of Smith's greatest asset.
I couldn't describe what he looked like in the article, so I described his hands. And I remember they were just clasped like that for 2 hours, and he was kind of hunched over.
Smith's hands were the telltale sign that revealed him to former teammate Dave Kopay.
Here Jerry was talking anonymously in the Washington Star article. And I knew it was Jerry because of his scarred, disfigured hands that was mentioned in the article. I said, at least I can do something that I believe in, something that will stand me that I can look myself in the mirror, you know?
The next day, the phone rang at the office, and it was Dave Kopay.
2 days after Smith's anonymous statements were printed, Kopay became the first retired professional athlete to reveal his homosexuality.
Jerry would always say that he was really glad of what I'd done, but he couldn't be me at all. And he said, just let me know when the next bomb hits.
That came 2 years later in Kopay's autobiography. The book used a pseudonym to recount Kopay's sexual relationship with Smith.
I know that he was disappointed. That depiction was not something that he wanted to be remembered by.
I tried to call him many times after that, and he wouldn't accept my calls, or wasn't available, or wasn't around. I left messages where he was supposed to be in different places.
It's sort of like you're in a relationship and one partner in that relationship goes out and betrays you. You know, tells all your stuff to everybody. I mean, on one hand, people was delighted to have a person who had played football out, like Dave Kopay.
I love the game. In a way, it's like another reason why I'm speaking out, so maybe to create some room and to destroy all the lies and the myths that you've always heard about homosexuality.
On the other hand, we thought that friendship had been violated and an unwritten code of conduct had been violated.
I think it was a fair portrayal. Yeah, I don't think it was a vindictive.
By the late 70s, Smith's skills had diminished, and his odds of making the Redskins roster grew longer. But George Allen kept bringing him back.
Nice to see Jerry Smith back.
Because of Jerry working hard, being a consummate teammate, that's why George brought him back. He knew he could help us win.
Jerry Smith's playing career ended quietly. He had just one catch in 1977 and spent the '78 season on the injured list. Smith retired with over 400 catches and the NFL record for touchdowns by a tight end, a mark that would tragically outlive Smith himself. Coming up.
I said, "How long have you known?" He said, "I found out last week." And I said, "What hospital are you in?"
We were in the kitchen. It was a couple years out from after he retired. He, came in and said, I need to let you know something, and I just wanted you to know exactly who I am. I mean, you know me as your brother, but he proceeded to tell me that, he had a different lifestyle. And he didn't come out to everybody. It wasn't a media event or anything, and still very private. And I still thought about him as my brother and the star that he was, what his choices were for how he was living his life. That really did not change any of my feelings towards him.
As soon as he retired, then the whispers started. And then we were aware of his persuasion, but we treated him like we did everybody else because he was one of us. He'd come to my home and sit down and I would eat my kids, That's just how close we were.
After retiring, Jerry Smith moved to Texas and co-owned a gay bar in Austin named the Boathouse.
I think he told Briggs that he never should have gone to Texas.
He was living down in Texas. And when he came back, I just looked at him and I thought he looked much thinner. And he developed this really high fever, real bad cough. Bumped him in the car and we took him down to Holy Cross. The doctor came in and proceeded to tell him, listen, we ran all the tests. It looks like you have HIV. And it was pretty silent. Seemed like hours, but I'm sure it was just seconds. They didn't even have AZT then, which is now part of the cocktails, but they didn't really have anything.
An epidemic of normally rare diseases continues to kill homosexual males in this country, and the outbreak is described now as the most important new public health problem in the country.
Do we know for certain what causes it?
No.
Do we know for certain where it comes from?
No.
Has there ever been an epidemic that you know of that has limited itself to one segment of a community?
No. People forget that in the early 1980s, there was almost a proposal that would have required all of us to have tattoos, so people could look at our hands and see that if we were vulnerable to HIV/AIDS. This is the world that Jerry got sick in. Doctors didn't have to treat us. Undertakers wouldn't bury us. We had to set up special AIDS wards because we were considered leopards. Our insurance companies didn't cover us because they said it was self-inflicted.
AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. It's a big name with even bigger implications. It is not only the name for a disease, it is another name for fear.
With HIV destroying his body, Smith decided to share his story with the world.
When you are facing death, you want to get a lot of things off your chest. And George Solomon was a well-respected writer, and I don't think Jerry would have done that unless he felt comfortable with George.
It was really difficult. I had done my research, but I wasn't scared. It was very important because he was the first prominent athlete to contract the disease. And the Post put the story on the front page of the newspaper. It was a big deal.
Jerry Smith of the Washington Redskins. He was one of the leading pass receivers in the National Football League. Now he has AIDS.
And it's somebody like Jerry Smith, who is loved and respected in this city and elsewhere, then it gives a whole different feeling to what this disease is all about.
Jerry Smith would not talk about his private life, and he would not talk about how he might have caught AIDS. It just happened, he said. It just happened.
We had a ground rule that we weren't going to discuss how he got sick, and I adhered to that ground rule.
Everyone knew how he got it, and he knew everyone knew he got it. And if you had practiced all of your life how to lie with excellence, how to lie to your family, to your faith, to your National Guard members, to your teammates, to your coach, those words escaping your lips doesn't come easy after years of practice. Could have you done more? Probably not, given who he was. And that's damn okay.
Regardless of the situation, no matter how tough times might be, never give up. Try to stay positive. We just talked about all the fun that we had. And then we had other teammates that as soon as they found out, they were there. There was no issue with questions about, I didn't know he was gay, or, they were really concerned about Jerry, the teammate and the friend.
I went to see him in the hospital. And, you just felt terrible to see him that way because he was so healthy and strong. And
he was always upbeat, always had a smile on his face. He was just real weak, and it was sad. That was a sad day.
Oh, man. That's a terrible sick, It's tough to explain that.
Dear Jerry, if anyone can lick this thing, you can.
You're not only were the very best tight end the Redskins ever had, you also were the toughest. Like we've always said, no matter how many setbacks you have had, keep fighting. I want you ready for my next team. That one will be called the Over the Hill Gang. Warmest personal regards, George Allen.
I think his last down, he was like about 130 pounds. And, the faces showed up, and there's nothing that you can do.
Every day he'd be worse. They were giving him painkillers, and he didn't recognize anybody at that time. And it was sad. It was bad. It wasn't Jerry. But he took it like a man.
I regret to have to announce to you that Mr. Gerald Smith, age 43, expired at Holy Cross Hospital last evening, October 15th, at 8:15 p.m. Mr. Smith, as you know, had suffered from the acquired immune deficiency syndrome, as had been reported by Mr. George Solomon earlier this year in the Washington Post.
One thing about death, that even when you're preparing for it, you're never prepared. I don't care what anyone says.
And then we all were Paul Burns, at the service.
When we lost him, it was one of the saddest days because if you'd been at the funeral, you would have seen some pretty big guys crying. We were boo-hooing all over the place.
There was not an easy moment in there. The man showed enormous courage and left a great legacy. He was one of the kindest, most gentle, got your back type guys you ever could meet.
I couldn't be more proud. You always looked up to your older brother, but I looked up to my younger brother.
Up next on A Football Life.
Shannon Sharpe has just tied Jerry Smith for most touchdowns in a career for a tight end.
It's joyous in thinking back to all the good times, but it's emotional because at the same time, I think he would just relish in watching the Skins and watching his nephews. And, we miss him. It's not a day that goes by that, his name doesn't really come up in our family.
In the NFL, Jerry Smith's name has become lost in the shadows of history.
In today's game, he'd be a 90 reception a year type of player.
If we had had pre-snap movement in those days, if I could move Jerry, just put him out wide and start him in motion, then they couldn't jam him, and he would have been so much better.
Look at his numbers. There aren't many tight ends that have his numbers. I think we had 60 touchdowns. We were playing at 10 and 12 games. He should be in the Hall of Fame.
Does Jerry belong in the Hall of Fame? His numbers certainly would add up in comparison to the guys who were in there. Mike Ditka, John Mackey, Jackie Smith, and Charlie Sanders of the Lions. When Jerry left, he was the second all-time leading tight end in NFL history in terms of catches, and first in touchdowns.
His tight end record of 60 career touchdowns lasted 27 years. until it was finally broken by Shannon Sharpe.
Now behind Jerry Smith for the all-time tight end lead in that category. Plummer looking for the score. He's got it! Shannon Sharpe has just become the all-time record holder among tight ends.
Shannon has certainly left his mark on the National Football League.
In Washington, D.C., those who left their mark are remembered with monuments. So it's fitting that this is one place the name Jerry Smith can still be found.
If you look up in our stadium, he's in our Ring of Honor and has been there for a number of years. His contributions to the Washington Redskins on the field and off the field will never be forgotten. 4 years ago, we started our homecoming, an annual homecoming. This year it was a special occasion that we got to invite Jerry's sister and his nephew to come, and players were able to express to her their thoughts.
Jerry babysat my children, and we were very close. He's a great guy, great guy.
It's been a while. I know. He would have loved to have been coming to something like this.
There's nothing you could say bad about Jerry. And I still say to myself, we would have won, we would have tied that Super Bowl game if that ball had not hit that crossbar.
The crossbar.
And I could see in her face the thrill of remembering the great moments of Jerry's professional career.
Remember he had that weird finger that had like the thing? I was like, Jerry, you need to get that finger fixed. He goes, no, that's how I catch the football.
You know, Tim was only 5 when Jerry died, so he doesn't have a lot of memories of him. One of his friends got him this great, authentic jersey, but they wrote Jerry Smith across the back. And people will stop him, and they'll be like, the greatest hands in the league. You know, that was Mr. Clutch. When we had third down, we always knew it was going to, 87 across the middle.
Do you remember him? Oh, he was a hero of mine. Are you kidding me? He electrified that stadium. He was a clutch player. You need that first down. He was there, man. He made the catch. He was a great, great player.
It's been 35 years since Jerry Smith retired from professional football. Much has changed since then. But still, no active NFL player has announced his homosexuality.
Nowadays, I don't think it would matter. It's a different time now than it was in the 60s. I think the hysteria then just really kind of jaded a lot of things, a lot of good accomplishments. He was a man that had done a lot of really good things and tried to live life the way that was good for him and true for him and be an asset to a team, to a family, to his town.
That's what I remember about him, his commitment to the game and to his teammates. We were fortunate to have him as a Redskin.
He was a gentleman, the kind of guy, you want to always be around. He never had a bad word for anybody, and I was proud to play with him.
Jerry Smith focused on excellence. That's really what it's all about, what he contributed not only to the sport, but for the community.
There are a lot of heroes and heroines that made it possible for where we're at today. Many who we won't know their names like we know Jerry Smith. But isn't it wonderful we do know the name Jerry Smith? For his courage, his dignity, and for being a damn good player.